For the record, my name is Brian Worrell, District 4 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. Today is May 1st, 2025. It is 2:14 p.m. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings beginning in April and running through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. 1, attend one of our hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at the end of each departmental hearing and also at 2 hearings dedicated to public testimony. The full hearing schedule is on our website at boston.gov/council-budget. You give testimony in person, here in the chamber, or virtually via Zoom. For in-person testimony, please come to the chamber and sign up on the sheet near the entrance. It will be taken at the beginning of this hearing following the panelist presentation. Individuals will be called on in the order which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our Council Budget Review website or by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov or by emailing Karishma Chauhan at boston.gov. That is karishma.chouhan@boston.gov. You will receive the Zoom link and your name will be added to the list. When you are called to testify, please state your name and affiliation and/or residence and limit your comments to a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. The second way you can testify is email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. And the third way is to submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on dockets number 0822 through 0830 and docket number 0835 through 0836. FY26 budget for the Environment Department, Office of Food Justice, Conservation Commission Revolving Fund, and the Distributed Energy Revolving Fund. These matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on April 9, 2025. Today I'm joined by my council colleagues in order of arrival: Council Liz Braden, Council Aaron Murphy, Council President Rusi Louis Jen, Council Gabrielle Coletta Zapata, and Council John Fitzgerald. And we have a letter of absence from Council Henry Santana. We will now go to today's panelists to introduce themselves and to dive into their presentation. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Chair Worrell. In terms of the slides, I think this is a different docket that you have showing. This is not EEOS.
Oh, yep, that is not.
So Brian Sweat, Chief Climate Officer for the City of Boston in the EEOS Cabinet, that we're talking about today is the Environment Department, the Office of Climate Resilience, and the Office of Food Justice. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. Excited to be here, and then I'll have some brief introductory remarks.
Hi, Hello? I think I'm waiting. Okay, there we go. Oliver Sellers Garcia, Environment Commissioner and Green New Deal Director.
Chris Osgood, Office of Climate Resilience.
Aliza Wasserman, Office of Food Justice.
Taisha Rogers, Director of Admin and Finance for the EUS Cabinet.
So excited to be here, Chair Worrell, to present on those budget items related to those 3 offices and departments. I think you'll see, first and foremost, our submission and the mayor's submission consistent with our overall direction on being more precautionary in these uncertain times. We are investing in critical programs. We have one new major program that was announced at the State of the City, the Boston Energy Saver Program. But most of this budget is about continuing to do the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. You will also see presented some reorganization to be fit for purpose. And so we'll talk a bit about that, but as you may recall, last year there was not an Office of Climate Resilience. That was established in this fiscal year, and we are continuing to embed that, given the priority of climate action and being climate resilient. We've repositioned a few other roles to be fit for purpose, in the context of not creating new FTEs, but making sure that we are future fit in terms of our governance and our structure. So excited to talk with you all about that. And I'll turn it over first and foremost to our Environment Commissioner, Oliver Sellers Garcia.
That's right, and Brian said foremost, so I won't let it get to my head. But thank you. I'm Oliver Sellers Garcia, again, Environment Director and Environment Commissioner and Director of the Office of Green New Deal Director. So I am going to walk through some slides very quickly. Just to remind you that the mission of the Environment Department is to enhance quality of life by protecting air, water, and natural resources, and by addressing the causes and impacts of climate change. As Chief Sweat mentioned, we really have a budget that continues with the theme of the overall city budget to be level funded in all cases except the addition of the Boston Energy Saver Program, which is a new exciting program that will be rolling out over the course of the remainder of this calendar year to reduce energy burden, energy costs, and climate emissions for residents and small businesses in Boston. So the personnel increase you see is due to cost of living increases. The operating budget non-personal is the program that I mentioned. And the capital changes noted here in this slide are the completion, indicate the completion of some important capital projects from Renew Boston Trust. The major operational changes, of course, my colleague Chris Osgood will talk about the launching of the Office of Climate Resilience that was formerly with staff in the Environment Department proper. There is an important change in our recycling program to focus on circular economy, and also what began at the end of the last fiscal year and we completed this year was the full integration of the Green New Deal staff into the Environment Department. So quick highlight on some accomplishments for the year. If I could move to the next slide. There we go. In preparation for the launch of the Boston Energy Saver, we signed a really groundbreaking MOU with our energy utilities to set targets for heat pump installation and weatherization with a joint commitment to collaborate and bring more in-kind resources. We've made our first awards from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund for affordable housing, renewable energy, and deep decarbonization projects that supports BERDO compliance in the affordable housing sector, as well as partnering with the Planning Department to launch the country's first net zero carbon zoning. We have launched our currently open program for community clean air grants for local nonprofits, up to $1 million for the total awards, 200 for each award. And as I mentioned, we've launched the new circular economy program. We've begun in partnership with Boston Public Schools and Operations, the city's first geothermal project, and we're also doing our own BERDO compliance work and moving forward there. Finally, I'd like to mention that we are in the midst of a climate action plan update that we launched earlier this year that's very important for setting the direction over the next 5 years. From an operational standpoint, we've filled all director positions and have reduced our vacancies from this point last year that was 12 down to 3. And some new initiatives that we have also launched recently are the first Climate Leader Awards, which took place only a few weeks ago, and the creation of a interagency climate council, which Chief Sweat will talk about at the end of our presentation. And then quickly, just to talk about some goals for next year, you'll see a lot of continuity, as well as meeting the moment of our new challenges. So we'll be launching the Boston Energy Saver program and really continuing to expand our engagement for BERDO compliance and reporting among many different types of building owners. We will be completing the Boston Wetlands Ordinance revisions, which will take into account climate change and environmental justice, and also partnering with other agencies, including parks, on an urban wilds management and strategic plan. We'll be working to complete energy procurement contracts to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions, as well as decarbonization projects in our building stock. And finally, we really are taking the next challenge in completing our climate action plan and starting to think about how we play a greater role in partnering on the cleaning and expansion of our electric grid. As well, finally, operationally, we seek to fill those last few positions and retain the excellent talent of my department. So with that, I will pass it to Chris Osgood, and I will say that in the course of the question and answer, we really look forward to the discussion and answering as many questions as we can. And anything we can't answer in real time, we would be very happy to get back to you later in writing or in another form. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. I'm Chris Osgood. I have the great pleasure of leading the city's new Office of Climate Resilience, an office that was created by the mayor and by Chief Sweat. Great support from the council here to ensure that we are leading on our all-of-government approach to address the climate risk in front of us. Extreme heat, stormwater flooding from intense precipitation, and coastal flooding. There is, as Oliver mentioned, great historical connection, but also a really important synergy between the Office of Climate Resilience and the Environment Department, which is why the OCR budget is actually a component of the overall Environment Department's budget. As you see on this slide, there's been a tremendous amount of work both over the course of the last fiscal year and equivalent ambition for the year ahead to make sure that we are doing those projects that protect our constituents, protect their property, protect our communities, so we can make sure that Boston remains a place that every family can call home for generations to come. Some of that work includes efforts to make sure that we are helping our residents, most notably youth, our seniors, those who are most impacted by extreme heat during the heat emergencies that we have seen over our last several summers. With great credit to our Office of Emergency Management and our Public Health Commission, we've been able to support an expansion of tools to provide places for shade, access to water during those extreme heat days. And with great credit to the OCR team and a number of other partners, been able to launch what we believe is the largest installation of green roofs on bus shelters anywhere in the nation over this course this last year. We are complementing those efforts around providing shade and water with increasing work and collaboration focused on tree planting, making sure that we are lowering the temperature, particularly in those parts of our city that experience higher temperatures during the course of the summer. Part of that is work on our streets, led by our Parks Department. Part of that is work which is on private property with support of some outside funding that you'll notice in this budget to move forward in something called the Boston Tree Alliance. Similarly, there's been a lot of work in collaboration with many of you on dealing with coastal flood risk. Again, you see some of that highlighted here on this slide. Last September, we joined with many of you for what was the city's, and similarly, we believe the nation's first Deployables Day. This was a one-day training exercise for those folks who have deployable flood walls, for them to be able to set them up in our city, in part to make sure that those property owners, those folks who had deployable flood walls, were doing annual training, in part, though, to really be able to expose the broader Boston community to interim solutions as we think about the longer transformation of our coastline. And one of those sites that you see featured here is the deployable flood wall, which was installed with our Parks Department at the Maryland Walsh Greenway, as well as one which is managed by the MBTA at the Aquarium Station. As that interim work goes forward, there's obviously a lot of collaboration with many of you in your districts on projects that help close some of the longer-term and near-term flood paths that exist, things which will most importantly protect our neighborhoods from coastal flood risk. And you see Border Street, one of those projects, funded in the capital budget, or the design funded in the capital budget, highlighted on this slide. There's also a significant amount of work which happens not just within the Office of Climate Resilience or in the Environment Department, but in our Streets Cabinet, in our Planning Department, and in our Parks Department, driving forward a number of these resilience projects. So the budget that you see in the upper left-hand corner of this slide is really a portion of the city's overall investment in climate resilience. Similar to Oliver's point on the operating budget, the actual personnel budget for the Office of Climate Resilience remains stable, although we're going to be able to expand our staff by one over the course of this year thanks to outside funding, and a significant portion of that capital budget, which is the largest investment in the city's history around resilience projects, around risk-reducing climate projects, is sustained in this budget, and we appreciate the council's steadfast support of that. That is the budget which is going to allow us to most notably, again, help protect our residents for generations to come. So appreciate this conversation, this opportunity, and your ongoing support of this work. And I'll pass it over to Eliza Wasserman, who leads our Office of Food Justice.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks so much to the chair and council. My name is Eliza Wasserman. I'm the director of the Office of Food Justice, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you about our work and hear from you any questions and concerns that you have. Our mission at the Office of Food Justice is to build a food system that is equitable, resilient, sustainable, and just. And over the past 3 years, we have significantly expanded and deepened our office's work in particular neighborhoods and at a citywide scale. Much of that work has been due to the fact that we have been able to expand and fill all the positions on our team, and I do really want to thank the OFJ team of 7 permanent staff and fellows who have really been dedicated to serving residents, learning from them, even amidst significant changes. I will note that similarly to what Chris mentioned, we work very closely with Grow Boston, the Boston Public Schools Food and Nutrition Services, Boston Public Health Commission, and other city departments and state agencies and community partners to make sure that we can carry out our mission as effectively as possible. And we do appreciate the council's recent codification of the Office of Food Justice to support us to continue to address resident needs into the future. I will just highlight a few key accomplishments and share our overall FY26 budget request. In order to build equitable access and distribution systems for fresh, culturally relevant, nutritious, and regionally grown food citywide, in this past fiscal year, we provided $420,000 for farmers market food through farmers market coupons, so fresh food at no cost to Boston residents via 20 farmers markets and the 33 community-based organizations that actually distribute those coupons. We have developed an internal dashboard for the program that will help us understand exactly who is using those coupons, what type of food, where they're getting them, which we are using along with other data in partnership with the Public Health Commission's Chronic Disease Prevention and Control Division, with a planning committee of farmers markets to really determine how we will continue to support affordability at farmers markets into the future while we continue to support the program this summer, as that had previously been an ARPA-funded program that we are looking to continue addressing the goals of the program into the future. Also towards that aim, this fiscal year we were able to expand our Double Up Food Bucks program to a total now of 8 stores in Roxbury, Dorchester, and East Boston, and that program has provided over $800,000 in fresh fruits and vegetables to SNAP shoppers at those participating stores since 2018. We are actually going to be doing some more communications to make sure that as many folks in the community who are SNAP recipients can participate in that program as possible. Relatedly, we launched a community outreach leaders program this past fiscal year, which allowed us to fund 5 community-based organizations to train community residents in 8 neighborhoods to do peer-to-peer outreach for their community members to really understand what programs, federal, state, and local and community nutrition assistance programs they could be partaking in, as well as how to navigate those programs. You might recall, thanks to support from the council to allocate ARPA funds, this past year we were able to seed an investment of $2.5 million of ARPA funds to create the Greater Boston Collaborative Food Access Hub in partnership with the YMCA of Greater Boston and about at least a dozen other nonprofits that work to recover, store, and distribute food across the city. That project, the YMCA is currently using this space, and there are agreements they have in process with 5 other organizations who will be moving into the space, as well as about a dozen other partners who will be involved in moving food in and out into different communities in Boston. Through that same resource, we were able to support grants to 12 food access and food recovery organizations working to serve residents in East Boston, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Roslindale, and West Roxbury, and serving the whole city, specifically for cold storage to help them maintain fresh food and especially recovered food through refrigeration and freezer space and refrigerated vehicles as well. So though that effort was one of the strategies recommended by the food recovery assessment that we released this fall, which included a number of additional recommendations for how the city can really increase the scale of food recovery and strengthen pathways for food insecure residents to access fresh, healthy recovered food. And we will be implementing additional recommendations from that report in the new fiscal year. And finally, we have supported Boston Public Schools Food and Nutrition Services, which provides over 49,000 meals a day, to roll out their new 5-year strategic plan, which will really expand equitable access to scratch-cooked fresh meals with local ingredients for all students. And so we are continuing to support them around identifying ways for the sourcing of the food ingredients to be as values-based as possible, with a goal of achieving 30% of food purchased to be produced in the Northeast and 5% of that food to be purchased from Black, Indigenous, and people of color owned vendors. And related to expanding the impact of that work, we are beginning to work with some of the hospitals and universities in Boston to really understand what the collective impact can be of working towards shared goals for values-based food purchasing and food recovery. So we are developing a collective commitment to that work with them, which we'll be building a structure for in the new fiscal year. So our sort of overall budget that you'll see is a level funded budget with cost of living adjustments in the personnel line, which are sort of a 2% increase for that. And most of this budget for us is our contracted services line, which is how we partner with community organizations who actually run most of these food access programs. And so just to mention, in the new fiscal year, we're planning to evaluate the impact of our Double Up Food Bucks program as we aim to continue that program into the new fiscal year, developing a sustainable approach to addressing affordability at farmers markets that doesn't ideally shift from year to year, as well as how we will attract more produce farmers to Boston farmers markets. We will be launching a new round of the Community Outreach Leaders program to hopefully help folks navigate access to the various nutrition assistance programs that they are eligible for, prioritizing implementation of recommendations from that food recovery assessment that I mentioned, and continuing to expand assessment of food spending for values-based food purchasing and conducting some outreach to support vendors, small food vendors and BIPOC-owned food vendors to be able to better work through those food contracts that the city has through our procurement channels. So, as there are changes happening at various levels of government, we are continuing to work with community-based organizations and partners to ensure that our programming is as stable as possible and ensuring that residents are aware of the programs that are available to them as well as any changes to those programs. Thank you. I think that's, so hand
Great.
back to Chief Sweat.
So just to pull back up to 30,000 feet for a moment, a couple of the other changes in this issue set, and obviously there's a lot going on between the three offices and departments. One thing that we did over the last year to really truly embed an all-of-government approach around climate action was create an inter-cabinet climate council. And so we have a baker's dozen of cabinet chiefs from Mayor Wu's cabinet actively meeting once a month. Their teams are meeting, their leadership teams are meeting more often than that to help steer and guide the city's approach to climate action. The primary, as Oliver mentioned, we're well underway on updating our climate action plan, but this body, created by executive order from the mayor, will continue to serve to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, supporting each other, and understanding that really our approach to climate action is not embedded just in the departments and offices in this cabinet, but needs to be fully embedded city government-wide. And honestly, truly embedded in all of our private sector organizations, our NGOs, our community groups, if we're going to be successful. So our 2030 climate action plan is one of partnership and one of collective responsibility. So that was one change over the last year. Secondly, as I mentioned, we did create an Office of Climate Resilience. So just wanted to provide you all with sort of the current org chart. And again, the point of creating this office and, with support of the council, was to have a centralized point of responsibility and accountability for achieving climate resilience across our three primary climate threats. Recognizing that there's an all-of-government approach, but there needs to be a hub of accountability as we move from really a decade plus of planning into a decade plus of action. And so this is the new org chart moving forward. And then lastly, one of the things we're very excited to have piloted and put out there in terms of the furthering transparency is this Green New Deal dashboard. So for yourselves, as well as in particular your constituencies and folks watching the hearing, for more regular information on progress against performance, against our KPIs, against funding requests, we invite folks to visit as often as they like and provide feedback into the information which we are measuring our progress against going forward. So with that, Chair, we're open to questions. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your presentation and all your hard work. We will now have a round of public testimony. You can testify either in person or via Zoom. If you'd like to testify virtually, please sign up in advance using the link below. After you have signed up, you'll be provided with the hearing Zoom link. Please make sure you are signed into Zoom with the full name you signed up with to help us call on you appropriately. If you'd like to testify in person, please sign up on the sheet near the chamber entrance. And when your name is called to testify, please step forward and introduce yourself into the microphone. Participants will be called on in the order which they signed up, and you have 2 minutes to testify. We will start with a video that was sent in from Sarah Primeau.
Hi, my name is Rick Henry,
Hi, my name's Rebecca Riley Green.
and we're from the community of Hyde Park. We're also members of the Neighborhood Food Action Collaborative, and we're here on behalf of the Office of Food Justice. The Office of Food Justice is one of our partners with the Neighborhood Food Action Collaborative, and they play a vital role in food insecurity in the Boston area and beyond. Things like SNAP and Double Up Food Bucks, and these are very important services that help communities to eat and to eat healthy. People are, don't have jobs, with the current climate and the atmosphere today. People are struggling. We run a food distribution site called the Hyde Park Food Pop-Up. We distribute to 150 to 200 people every week, and there's some of our members call us on a regular basis and ask us about food and they not being able to eat and feed their children, and so we pack bags and deliver to their homes. But we don't have enough support to carry this on without the help of the Office of Food Justice. So we're asking you to help make sure and sustain the Office of Food Justice's efforts to maintain the work that they're doing, very critical work that they're doing to make sure that communities can eat and eat healthy and thrive as well. So we urge you to prioritize funding for Office of Food Justice in this year's budget.
And one of the areas that our community desperately needs help is with the farmers market coupon program, and the support of the program that we've been able to assist the community with is our SNAP peer-to-peer advocacy, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without the help of the Office of Food Justice.
Thank you very much. An investment in the Office of Food Justice is an investment in food equity
In our community.
community resilience, and the well-being of Boston families. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi,
Now we'll go to in-person testimony. Gregory Maynard, the floor is now yours.
Hello, my name is Gregory Maynard. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Policy Institute, a nonprofit corporation focused on providing nonpartisan information and in-depth analysis about the most important issues facing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the City of Boston. For each issue, BPI does original research, engages subject matter experts for analysis, and monitors and reports on progress and activity. My testimony today focuses on an issue that has been missing from budget hearings and Boston City Council agendas for some time: the Landmarks Commission and the Office of Historic Preservation. Neither was included in last year's budget hearings, and that seems to be the case again this year. That is a major oversight because both have gone through major leadership changes over the last year, and the Landmarks Commission was the subject of a still unresolved scandal. As a reminder, last April, a letter from the Boston Landmarks Commission's 16 members became public. That letter was sent to Mayor Wu and expressed concerns about her administration's disregard for their oversight role and claimed Mayor Wu's staff interfered with their procedures, citing specific instances of agenda manipulation and denying full project scopes for review, using 6 specific examples, including White Stadium renovations, the Hotel Buckminster, and Boston City Hall. The Hotel Buckminster was also written about in the Boston Globe in an August 2023 article. Following the letter, it was reported by the Dorchester Reporter that the Landmarks Commission's executive director, Roseanne Foley, was fired by Mayor Wu. Since Foley was fired, there have been 3 more major leadership changes at the Office of Historic Preservation, where Landmarks Commission sits. First, sometime after May 2024, Murray Miller, the first person to lead the Office of Historic Preservation, left his position. Second, in September 2024, the City of Boston announced that Kathy Kotaridis had been hired as the new director for OHP. Third, in March 2025, OHP hired Elizabeth Shervra as OHP's new deputy director, and according to the city's website, she is also serving as the executive director of the Landmarks Commission. The council's budget process is a chance for councilors to ask what is happening in each department and how the city is dealing with various public issues. For example, how the allegations in last year's letter from the Landmarks Commission have been addressed. The absence of OHP and the Landmarks Commission from this year's budget hearing schedule, combined with the lack of a public hearing about the issues revealed in the commissioner's letter last year, means the council is unable to perform that role in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to virtual testimony. Michael Zayas. And then followed by Sarah McCammond.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Zayas, and I'm here today on behalf of Eastie Farm and the Boston Food Access Council, or BFAC for short. The Boston Food Access Council works in partnership with community-based organizations, advocates, and residents to ensure that every Bostonian, regardless of income or zip code, has access to fresh, healthy, and culturally appropriate food through advocacy and awareness building. And we are here today to voice our strong support for full funding of the Double Up Food Bucks program and the Farmers Market Coupon program for the 26 budget. These programs are not just effective, they're essential. They directly increase the purchasing power of low-income residents using SNAP while also supporting local farms and small food businesses across the city. It's a win-win that boosts public health, strengthens our local economy, and fosters food sovereignty. In 2023 alone, these programs helped thousands of Bostonians bring fresh produce home from neighborhood farmers markets and local grocers like the Daily Table and the Dorchester Food Co-op, places where food is accessible and community is built. The continued and expanded funding of these initiatives reflects the city's commitment to equity, sustainability, and food justice. Moreover, it is protecting and fully funding these programs that is more critical now than ever before, with food insecurity rates and grocery prices at all-time high levels, while at the same time critical safety net programs, including SNAP and WIC, are under significant threat at the federal level. So we urge the committee to prioritize this funding as a core part of the environment and food justice budget, and to recognize that food access is not a luxury, it's a right. Thank you all for your time and continued leadership in building a healthier, more just Boston.
Thank you. Sarah, the floor is now yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I just have a couple brief remarks to draw attention to a critical area of concern, and that is our coast and coastal resilience. And the current environment where we've seen the cancellation of federal programs that were to support Moakley and other places. And in particular, I'm going to draw attention just to talk about timing, urgency, and looking at the Fort Point Channel Infrastructure Project, which was identified in Climate Ready in 2018. In 2019, the city submitted for a FEMA grant, and it has been 7 years. The encouraging news is there is still on conversation that is occurring for this grant, but the downside is that we don't have 7 years to wait for funding, and the money that was put into the capital budget back then of the $10 million, we know that some of that money has necessarily been spent down in order to do the necessary engineering and planning and detailed work for the plan, but it just draws attention that there's going to be some hard decisions to make. We are going to need to move forward one way or another, with or without funding from FEMA, and protect not only the neighborhoods along the Fort Point Channel, but also going further to protect Boston. And I highlight that particular one just as an example because we see this all around, and I think that it's time that we really need to work. So I'm, looking forward. I think there's many positive happening. The council that Chief Sweat talked about, but we have an opportunity for a new waterfront development at the Gillette property, and we really just need to be thinking about how much development should we be put in flood zones and what we're going to have to protect those. And we can't just rely on private developers to just protect their properties. So I'm just speaking the word for urgency and for support of capital dollars in our budget and shovels in the ground. Thank you very much. Oh, and I would just like to add really quickly, if I have the time, that I live in an historic district and fully support the other speaker about not having an opportunity to speak and look specifically at the budget for the Office of Historic. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who came to give public testimony. Now I'll go on to council questions. We'll go by the order of arrival, starting with Councilor Liz Braden. The floor is now yours.
Mr. Chair, could I allow Council President Louis Jen to go? She's after me. She's the next one after me. She came in second.
All right. The chair recognizes Councilor President Louis Jen. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Braden, for your kindness and allowing me to go. And thank you to all of you for all of your incredible work. It's so important that we do the work of trying to address the urgency of the climate crisis that's on our doorstep. I have a question about open space acquisitions. What is the budget for that this year? What are we prioritizing when we decide to use that funding for open space to actually do acquisitions, especially in EJ neighborhoods like Chinatown, like East Boston? So wanted to hear more about our open space work.
Sure. Councilor Louis Jen, that is a great question. It is a Parks and Rec budget question. Okay. Which is in a separate hearing, so okay. I don't have that number in front of me. It's to the tune of millions of dollars that we set aside for open space acquisition. Okay. But we'll be prepared to answer that at the Parks and Rec hearing.
Okay, yeah. So I'll hold off on that question then. I did really appreciate here that there's a complete overhaul of the wetlands ordinance planned. It's something that my office has been looking into because we hear about it a lot from constituents who think the ordinance is well intentioned, but there are ways that it could be improved and that makes implementation difficult. So I look forward to working alongside you all and the great community voices and leaders who have been really urging us to update the wetlands ordinance. So just wanted to thank you for your leadership on that. My questions are to you, Director Wasserman. I have a question just generally about the theory of what is your theory of food justice for your office and your vision for what it should be for this city? There are so many great different organizations, and we've had conversations about this, but a better understanding of how you envision getting to the point in the city where there's no food insecurity.
Yes, that's a great question. Happy to give you some answer now and as well talk about it more at another point if that's helpful. We have 4 strategic goals that we developed for our office in concert with Grow Boston. The first is to really increase equitable access to distribution systems for fresh, culturally relevant, nutritious food, and that those are some of the core programs that our office has been working on prior to becoming the Office of Food Justice and continuing to, and where possible to identify opportunities to really, within those food access programs that are citywide, to also shift the food system where possible to support a more resilient and equitable regional food system. So I think that the theory of change, I think, relies, because there are so many different efforts across the city to address food access. It relies on a number of different approaches at the same time, where we are addressing acute food insecurity, trying to move towards nutrition security, and as well as identifying ways to really leverage state and federal programs that are helping residents as much as possible. So those are some of the ways that we are leveraging those programs, as well as pointing residents in the direction of programs they may be eligible for that the city doesn't run ourselves. And then the second goal is around increasing the scale of food recovery as a way to address those immediate needs that have really been sustained at very high levels since the pandemic and have not gone down, and we know are inequitable across different neighborhoods in the city, different populations based on race, language, ethnicity. And then the third goal being to really shift more towards that part of the mission that is really trying to leverage those food access programs we have, where the city is spending our resources on food, to really ensure that as much as possible we are assessing where that food is produced, how it's produced, and moving towards values-based food purchasing where possible with the city's food dollars. So I think, and the fourth goal that we have developed with Grow Boston is primarily they're leading that work programmatically to increase food production in the city, which is part of that broader food justice vision of shifting towards a more equitable, resilient, sustainable, and just food system. So I would say it's not one thing, it's sort of all of the above, and really lifting up the work of many community organizations that are able to understand the needs in their communities around food insecurity, around food production, and providing impactful, effective resources to create as much of a citywide approach as possible that is targeted towards the communities where we know there's the most need.
Thank you. Do you feel like you have a good measurement tool?
I would say that's a great question. It's something we have been starting to work on in more depth this fiscal year, in really understanding, if you look at access across the city, how much of that is strictly access versus affordability. So I would say the measurement it's difficult to, I would say food systems is a newer field, and so there are a number of cities across the country that have been developing dashboards, and we're sort of in conversation with them about what are the best ways to balance measuring access, nutrition. It's sort of multifaceted, so that is in process.
And part of the reason why I ask these questions is that we have these entities that, like the Daily Table, for example, or you have the Dorchester Food Co-op, and part of them, the mission is to reduce food insecurity, to make healthy food available. But I also know that they often face their own struggles just in terms of surviving just as an organization. And so I'm wondering sort of like where they fit into the ecosystem and how we're able to support them, because there's a lot of alignment. And Director Wasserman, we've talked about this before, sort of like what is the most effective way. We have a number of organizations that have really great food pantries. And we have, nonprofit supermarkets. How do they work together? Or should we be supporting one form of attacking the food insecurity over another? And to me, low cost supermarkets are one of those ways, but we're not seeing sort of the return sometimes that we want to see. So I'm curious as to your take on that.
Yeah,
for an example, Daily Table in Mattapanich, it had to close. And we know that there are other, low-cost supermarkets that are struggling across the city that could be good ways of dealing with this issue.
Yeah, I would say our primary tool in working with those kinds of partners since the pandemic has been through the Double Up Food Bucks program, which helps to increase the actual purchasing power, but also increases sales with those partners in terms of their foot traffic of residents who are able to use SNAP and sometimes then use other forms of tender as well. The way our approach to Double Up Food Bucks in Boston has started by the prior director and team has really been focusing on supporting small businesses, grocery stores that are small businesses and nonprofits, primarily also BIPOC-owned corner stores and bodegas. And we have continued that as a priority for the program as a way to also support those stores. I will say that there are other ways that we could support those stores to continue to be really strong food access anchors in their communities as businesses that are in addition to that kind of nutrition incentive program, which has been the primary tool that we've been using.
I'd also just add, Council President, that we're trying to focus more and more on structural improvements to the food ecosystem program. So in addition to supporting programs and ongoing operations and nonprofits, how do we structurally as government engage in a way that actually provides permanent better access to food and nutrition, and ideally locally produced and obviously affordable and culturally appropriate food. So whether or not it's the cold storage food hub that we announced, which addresses a problem of it's not a supply of food in that case, it's the distribution and making sure that we have a place to recovery. That was a phenomenal investment that, as a seed project will enable 3 million meals a year from recovered food going out to Boston residents. How do we, better support our farmers markets and locations? How do we support, low-cost grocery stores in ways of, helping them around the real estate decisions that they can make? So I think part of this is making sure we're focused on the here and now in terms of programmatic support, but addressing as much as possible the structural inequities in the food system so that there are more permanent solutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President Louis-Jean. The chair now recognizes Councilor Murphy. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I'll start with the Environment Department, Office of Climate Resiliency. It looks like you have a 7.3% increase, which is attributed to a transfer of a position maybe from the Office of Streets and then also support for the Energy Saver program. Can you just elaborate on how these changes will enhance the department and implement and support the climate action plan, but also, BERDO 2.0?
So much, Councillor, and happy to talk about the transfer of the role. Ty, please feel free to add, and on the BERDO pieces, Oliver, please feel free to jump in there. The transfer of the role is actually the transfer of my role from, which was in the Streets Cabinet, to the Environment Department budget to lead the Office of Climate Resilience. So that's the principal change that you see there in terms of staffing. We're very fortunate to have our personnel budget as well as our non-personnel budget that'll be part of the larger Environment Department budget, and so Oliver can speak to the BERDO pieces.
All right, thank you.
Councillor, I will answer succinctly. The Boston Energy Saver is the only new investment in the budget, and that is all contract services to stand up a program at the end of the year that is going to be, think of it, among many pieces, the most visible will be sort of a front door, virtual and staffed with people to answer all sorts of questions for residents and small businesses about how to lower their energy costs. Think about things, for example, like energy efficiency in your home, how to buy energy that is lower cost. Things that are out there, but it's very hard for people to have one number to call to get all that advice and get answers on everything. So that's a program that will be funded to really get all of those answers, to have the consulting staffing to support city employees to answer all those questions. BERDO 2.0, we continue to fund all of that work through the level budget that includes, of course, several staff, but also contract services to provide technical support, financial suggestions for all of the covered buildings.
Thank you. the participatory budget initiative, it seemed like it directed $400,000 to fund grants to nonprofits that will address food insecurity. How do we plan on monitoring and evaluating this? You know, it's a positive impact, but I think goes on the former question too, like how do we, really get an idea, are we making a dent in the food insecurity across the city? And then if you also could speak on, because I did hear, and I know when we've had hearings before, like your partnership seems to be really strong with BPS, and how do they help support funds some of your initiatives, seeing as though their budget, I mean, obviously they do work directly with our children and it's, needed, but how do they then help kick in some of the funding to make sure that your ideas and to make sure our children are eating healthy, culturally appropriate food?
Yes, so we are in the process of identifying what will happen with those participatory budgeting funds and specifically identifying, to your exact point, how do we really create a program that serves what the residents voted for in that process, and also look at what the impact is so it's not just sort of a one-time investment, but really helps in a strategic way, where possible, move towards some of those systems changes that Chief Sweat mentioned. So we will be developing that as part of the program in the coming year. In terms of food and nutrition services at Boston Public Schools, I mean, all of the investments in those values-based food purchasing and really shifting towards even equipment investments throughout the district to increase the number of students who have daily access to scratch cooked meals. All of those investments are coming directly from Boston Public Schools. We are supporting in things like helping them to connect with partners, helping them with assessment, so measurement of when they're buying the food. So they've recently been participating in an assessment of the previous school year's purchasing to evaluate, was the food that was purchased environmentally sustainable, how did it hold up in terms of valued workforce and labor, racial equity, nutrition, et cetera. And so we are supporting on kind of helping them take their strategy and really make sure that the partners and the folks who can really leverage the scale, because they, as they say, the largest restaurant chain in New England. How do we identify the right kinds of partnerships that can help them achieve those strategic goals?
Okay, thank you. And it was great to be with you and Brian at the opening of the food distribution center over in Roxbury. In this council, so we should pat ourselves on the back, we did approve the $2.5 million in opera funds for that lease and renovation of that building. And there's always a need for refrigeration and freezer. I know some of the smaller nonprofit food distribution, they're always looking for, even electrical upgrades on, because they, maybe get a donation of a freezer, and how do we, make sure that we're able to keep our food fresh before it moves out there. But if you could just speak, because I think it's important if anyone listening in too, that the impact that will have. I mean, it was pretty amazing over there, and I know there's a lot of partnerships there, but how much of that, how many people will actually benefit from that?
I will say that a lot of that, we actually just got some reporting from them today, and I have like an hour ago, so I will be looking at the numbers around kind of impact so far. But because those partnerships and sort of the location of organizations that will actually be utilizing all of that space, continuing to actually turn on all of the refrigerators, there's really a lot of potential that we will be able to better measure once we understand kind of who are those untapped food donors that we could be really directing towards more of the community partners and community distribution sites once they are aware that that space can be part of the cold chain to getting recovered food to as many people as possible. So I don't want to give you a number that's based on a sort of a partial build out, as all those puzzle pieces are still getting put together.
But I'll give you a capacity number, right? I mean, that's the program goal, but we're, in addition to that grant on the Food Hub, there are about a dozen grants to smaller, refrigeration. So if the Food Hub is the wholesaler, obviously the end distribution to community members that need it, or sort of at the retail side. that food hub that we opened up has the capacity to potentially run 3 million meals a year, from the food going through that. So it is a major choke point that's now relieved. And again, this was food that otherwise would be going to waste in landfills. So it's this win-win of getting into stomachs instead of, emissions in the atmosphere.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Murphy. My apologies, Council Mejia, but I just want to acknowledge that Council Mejia has been present. We'll now go to Council Coletta Zapata. The floor is now yours. Oh, sorry, you're right. Sorry. Council Braden, the floor is now yours.
That's the thing about letting somebody else
yes.
stand in front of you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. I had a question on the food justice, just in terms of our local farmers market. I don't know, in terms of the partners that have been identified. Do you know if the Brighton Farmers Market has been identified as a partner for this summer?
Yes.
Well, that's good, because we do have the pattern of the population we have with a lot of very low income elders living in the immediate neighbourhood that need that support. So thank you very much. Then the other question I had was, I think we all recognise that climate change is coming at us. It's here. It has been here for a while. Coastal flooding is a big issue. I know my colleague, Councillor Coletta Zapata, she's right in the front line. Then we, out in Alston, Brighton, we're on the floodplain. Alston is on the floodplain of the Charles. And with rising sea levels and how resilient and how's the harbour dam going to hold up? Are we working in collaboration with other groups? I know the Mystic River watershed folks, and then we have the Charles River watershed. Are we working with those groups to sort of identify how we can mitigate the impacts of extreme weather and stormwater flooding in those spaces?
I'm happy to start. Brian, please feel free to add. Councillor, fantastic question. We are working very closely with the Mystic River Watershed Association, the Ponce River Watershed Association, and the Charles River Watershed Association. And together they bring a regional capacity to the issue of stormwater risk. To your point around the new Charles River Dam as well, DCR is doing some specific work with the U.S. Army Corps as well. Happy to coordinate with you if that's helpful, and DCR and the Army Corps to see if a briefing would be valuable. In addition to the work sort of at that watershed scale between Boston Water and Sewer Commission and the Office of Green Infrastructure and the Streets Cabinet, there's a lot of sort of specific in Boston work, both through the new stormwater program of the Boston Water and Sewer Commission and the new design standards of the Office of Green Infrastructure. So happy to dive a little bit deeper if that's helpful, but a lot of that regional coordination is happening and a lot of the local design work is moving forward.
And I know the issue around Beacon Yards is sort of very much futuristic at this point, given all the uncertainty in the economy and the political situation. But it seems, a lot of that land in that space was wetlands way back when. I hope that, we're looking at the possibility of re-establishing some capacity to store water in those spaces so that we don't have flooding. I don't know where we're at with that thinking.
So that is an active part of the conversation sort of in front of us. You have been obviously a very active participant in all the Beacon Park Yard conversations. There is some opportunity to think about how across the property owners, MassDOT, the MBTA, the City of Boston, and Harvard University, we think about larger scale green infrastructure in that area and water storage in that area, both because of what it was before there was some landfill, as well as sort of the historic Salt Creek that runs to that area. So there's some more work which we are looking at about how we can make sure that we are building something that really works for generations.
And in terms of the Salt Creek issue, it's more on, it's actually maybe more in Councillor Durkin's district than mine, but is there any thought about daylighting that, or in terms of upstream, backing up the water?
It's a great question. This is, I think, something which the Charles River Watershed Association has looked at, and I don't know sort of how much that is being considered in the current designs, but happy to take a look at that and get back to you.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. Thank you so much. And then the heat situation. we actually just filed a hearing order about looking at cooling centres, and cooling centres aren't the only answer to the heat situation, but you know Alston pretty well. Like we do have a serious heat island effect there with a lot of concrete and a lot of a lack of green space. So in terms of just cooling centres and other cooling infrastructure, I think we had the incidents last year. It was Juneteenth, federal holiday, schools were closed, BHA kids were going, they didn't have any cooling centres. You know, in terms of just amenities in the neighbourhood that would function, have dual functions perhaps, shade and cooling places that are not tied to a building per se, but are we looking at those sort of infrastructure improvements?
So two things. First, on the very specific cooling center point, and I appreciate you raising it. Last year, raising it in the Capitol hearing this year as well. I think there is some coordination that's happening between our Office of Emergency Management and our operations team to make sure that buildings that are under construction, either Jackson Man or buildings that may not be open on public holidays or on weekends, that we are making sure that we're able to provide public cooling centers. So looking at that both specifically to Alston Brighton as well as citywide. In general, we are looking at sort of three different places around cooling centers. One is how we cool public realm, so how we think about shade structures in the public realm, how we think about where we are planting street trees. Second is public buildings, which essentially are the cooling centers that we are making available, and how we think about staffing them, particularly during, to your point, hours where they may not otherwise be open, as well as programming them to make sure that they are inviting places that folks want to be. We're also very focused on making sure that we're thinking about private buildings. How do we think about the transformation of homes, in many ways in partnership with the really fantastic retrofit work that's already happening, to make sure that people who want to be able to stay at home are able to do that in a space that is cool. So those are sort of like the sort of scales that we are looking at: cooling our streets, cooling our public buildings, and then thinking about private buildings as well.
The other question I had was about electricity and energy storage. I know we've talked about it, we've had a hearing about it, but BESS facilities, I know the state's working on regulations and we're looking at regulations. Is there a way, you know, thinking about land use and siting, like we have one particular instance there's a lot of concern about in Alston Brighton, because it's very close to residential areas. It's really like, what, 60 feet away from houses or something crazy. So we all appreciate that it's necessary, that we're going to need this with electrification, but I had the same question this morning with the Do It team. Are we looking at geospatial information to try and figure out where the best places to locate these facilities are?
Okay, my mic is on now. Yes, Councillor, that's a great question, and I will try not to repeat too much of what we've already shared with the hearing, but I do think just to lay the groundwork a little bit for that. I think that we're not quite yet at the step of figuring out the places where things should be sited, especially because that's not exactly the way that a lot of the battery storage facilities are going to come about. They're really going to be proposed by a lot of different, whether it's the utilities or private facilities, that sort of meet the market and the opportunity. And the role that we are establishing is first really to wait for the state guidance and interpret what is, whether it covers all of our needs in Boston, whether it adequately addresses sort of the urban context, what can we really sort of adopt wholesale, which is why we're also working on two separate projects that support this, which is to develop educational materials so that when we have public engagement about any location, we can really bring everyone along with a better understanding both of what battery storage facilities are, as well as how they need to fit into our energy transformation future, as well as the planning department having a much more specific technical rubric for understanding what in their powers is best able to control and improve projects that are proposed. What I will say is, I think when we put all these pieces together, what we have hopefully is a few very important community engagement and decision-making tools for sort of all of the levers in local government to be able to interact better with what will be a very sort of long-term transition into adding energy storage facilities to the grid, to buildings, and frankly, in a evolving and hopefully improving technological landscape as well.
Thank you, and it's an ongoing conversation. I
Of
appreciate
course,
that.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. The chair now recognizes Councilor Coletta Zapata. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all so much for your work. Appreciate it. And I just want to shout out brilliant, talented people here as well, and those listening in within your cabinet. I really appreciate it. This team, your work and your progress is reflective of a mayor who understands that Boston has to continue to be a leader in local climate action and is a city that embodies what it means to be a Green New Deal city. So I just want to shout out our mayor for being a Green New Deal mayor and everything that she does. And there has been so much progress. And I just, again, just thank you, because there's been a lot of work that has happened. And it's great to see it all on display here and in other meetings and events and all of that. So just for folks that are listening in, just the ticks that I heard earlier in your presentation, Office of Climate Resilience, Internal Coordination Hub for ensuring that residents are protected against extreme weather events. It was essential to have a coordinated place to chase after federal and state funding. So thank you for that. And also work with dozens of waterfront affinity organizations. So thank you, Chris, for doing that. Thank you, Chief, for your leadership in creating that office. Codification of the Office of Food Justice. Love to see it. Thank you for your collaboration with that. The utilization of ARPA dollars for a food distribution fund. This was essential, and I know came from a lot of work on behalf of your office, Eliza, so thank you for that. Didn't know about the grants for the Food Access Organization, so that's excellent. Food recovery assessment. I love the fact that that took place. I think it was 2022 where then Councilor Arroyo and I had put forth this idea that if food is safe to consume and being put forth by large grocery stores, that it should go to folks that need it most, as long as it was safe to consume. And so just trying to figure out what that meant was the next step, and so the food recovery assessment was one of the first steps for that. I also just want to shout out, and it's more tangential, but the establishment of a joint BPS and BTU Climate Justice Curriculum Committee. This is the first step in ensuring that we are preparing the next generation to be environmental stewards and educated them about, yes, a global crisis, but bringing it down locally through an environmental justice lens. And your office was really important in those early conversations, so thank you for that. This is the first time that I'm hearing about a complete revision to the Boston Wetlands Ordinance. It sounds like everybody has maybe talked to the same people, so would love to know what that looks like. If you can just give us a broad overview of what you're thinking. One thing that I had heard, and I just want to shout out the Commissioner, Michael Parker, who's a Charlestown resident, enforcement is tricky. So just curious to know what that looks like and what you're thinking in terms of a full revision.
Sure, Councilor. I'd be happy to answer your questions and then follow up with more detail. But really, this is part of a multi-year phased approach to update the local wetlands regulation. And I wouldn't say it's a dramatic wholesale revision of all of it, because there's a lot that we have to build on. But this is the final of three phases to really take into account climate change, climate resilience, and environmental justice into both how, I'd say at a very high level, both what is sort of regulated and the outcomes that are sort of the taking those factors into account into what is regulated, but also the process and procedures by which the Conservation Commission operates. I think that is particularly important in the environmental justice space. And so I would like to applaud our Director of Environmental Quality, Alice Brown, who has really put together a very thoughtful approach to this that includes a council of folks from representing many different backgrounds, geographies, approaches to interacting with natural resources to shape a lot of that. And while we have some high level, like as I've explained to you, sort of the high level goals of where we hope to end up, this is very much a work in progress that is driven entirely by sort of the community feedback. And so when that is prepared closer to the end of the year, we will certainly have ample opportunity to get feedback and also to mainstream it more outside. But that's the process that we're going through now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I look forward to learning more and being a part of the process. And shout out to Alice, there's no better person to work on that. Office of Climate Resilience, we meet all the time. And so I really have no questions, except for the $91 million that was listed for the capital. How does that break down? I know potentially Coastal Resilience Fund, and then there's no change. And so curious to know how we're maximizing those dollars while we can.
Sure. So alphabetically, within that's how it is listed. So border streets at $1.5 million, which is the funding to get us through design. The Coastal Resilient Boston Harbor Study is essentially the name within the budget book for the U.S. Army Corps study that is listed at $5.7 million. The Climate Ready Boston Phase 3 is essentially $500,000 that is helping us advance, or will help us advance, a set of design projects. The Climate Resilience Reserve is the next thing in the budget at $3.9 million. That is essentially used to augment other capital projects to make sure that if they have an opportunity to include a resilience component, green infrastructure, for example, that it can. What you listed is the next item, which is the largest source. That's the Coastal Resilience Reserve at $75 million. And then the Moakley Park Connectors Project at $2.2 million is the final piece. The other two projects are two projects that Oliver referenced that rounds out that 91.3, which is $850,000 for Mattahunt Woods, which we expect to complete this year and cut the ribbon on this summer, and $2.5 million for Climate Ready Streets, which is being allocated into the streets budget to be able to move forward additional green infrastructure as part of a Safe Routes to School project. There are, happy to detail this further, but there are other sort of resilience-related investments, both within the parks budget and within the planning budget, that include things like investments in the Flynn Marine Park, investments in Moakley Park, et cetera. Happy to follow up with any more detail you want.
Excellent. Thank you. No, you answered my question. For food justice, so we had heard from Michael Zayas from Eastie Farm. He does great work. He was talking about fully funding the farmers market coupons, and I have to co-sign everything he said. It's a win-win. It helps reduce our carbon emissions when folks can get local, whole, nutritious foods in close proximity, and then also the Double Ups program. What is the reality of potentially fully funding this? We lost some money, right? Or am I getting that wrong? A completely different thing. If you can clarify for me.
We have not lost funds. We have an ongoing federal grant that is matched by city funds for the Double Up Food Bucks program, and we're able to get a no-cost extension that was slated to end early fall of 2025. And the new round of federal funding for that program is currently frozen, so nobody's been able to apply for the next round of that federal grant program, which is the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program. So we were able to get a no-cost extension, which will allow us to maintain current program levels through February, and we are hopeful that by then there will be opportunities for federal funding for that program, and we're hoping to be able to continue after that. For farmers market coupon program, we are able to continue that this year, sort of one-year temporary continuation of the previously ARPA funded program through operating funds, and we are going to be looking at other potential funding sources for the summer of 2026 for an approach to affordability at farmers markets, but we don't know yet what that is going to look like because we are doing this robust planning process with the farmers markets and community organizations and assessing both from farmers and the farmers markets and residents sort of what's most important for the city to support around affordability at farmers markets, because a lot of these, this is an example of a program that was developed rapidly as a pandemic recovery program, and so we have sort of the opportunity now to stop and pause and see what is the best way to meet these goals and needs, and not just do the same program we've been doing just because it exists.
Thank you. One last question, I'm sorry. Vice Chair.
Yes.
When did that happen? The $420,000, that's what's coming from operating? That was listed in the deck?
Sorry, the $420,000 was last summer, so that was a combination of ARPA funds, FY24 and FY25 operating funds, and this year we will be funding it with a combination of FY25 and FY26 operating funds, around $400,000 for the food, and then there's additional costs for sort of the capacity for the farmers markets and the organizations that distribute the coupons. So the total for that is about 570 across the 2 fiscal years.
Excellent. I'm really excited to hear that the city is stepping up in that way, so thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Carlos Zapata. Councilor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Vice Chair Peppin. Thank you all for being here. This may have been explained, and I apologize if I missed it, but under the budget summary, capital new investments, there's obviously an $18.6 million dollar drop. And I was just, is that the actual number, or are we just forecasting ahead now with what potentially could be cut?
Councilor, I think you're referring to the Environment Department from fiscal year 25-29 to fiscal year 26-30.
And then the
is that right?
26-30, exactly. Yep.
That's right. Okay. So that that really just actually represents a completion of the projects that had been sort of carried through in the plan. Obviously, understanding everything rolls over 1 year at a time in 5-year plans. So that actually represents the. It's not anything that's being cut. It's just actually that the. Several big energy projects have rolled off the books because they've been completed.
I get you. So even that year from 29 to 30, with that being completed, $18 million worth of work was essentially completed.
That's right, because it's the entire project is always held in the budget, even if it's been spent down year by year. Yep.
Understood. Did someone already ask that question?
Nope.
Okay. All right. For some reason, I was like, I feel like I'm being duplicative and got self-conscious for a sec there. The Office of Climate Resiliency, Mr. Osgood, obviously, I just bring up Morrissey Boulevard. We've been working closely on that together. There's still a lot going, still a lot of funding issues potentially, and we know it's several years away. But just with you being on the commission, but after that process is over, what is the role of your office as we continue on to try and implement this stuff?
I think there's really 2 pieces. One is thinking about advocating for a design that works for the community. And we know we've received a lot of feedback from the Savin Hill Civic Association, among others, around what the right design is for that stretch of Morrissey Boulevard between Ben Cooley and Freeport. So making sure that the design is right. And as we have had a lot of conversations about how we go from an actual plan to an actual project. And there are a couple of paths there. One, Chief Sweat submitted earlier this year a comment letter about the upcoming environmental bond bill, or the anticipated environmental bond bill. So we will be advocating for the state to invest or dedicate funding through the environmental bond bill to actually advance the design and ideally get it into construction. Second, we do want to continue to pursue any state or federal grant that may be relevant for this project, and there's some opportunities over the course of the year ahead that may be good candidates there. Related to that, we will be, through our U.S. Army Corps collaboration, looking at that stretch, and the Army Corps, in a slightly longer-term horizon, may be a partner for implementation. So both on the design and the implementation are places where I know we'll have lots of continuing conversations.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you and your office is there to advocate for that, so I appreciate that. I was looking at the Spotsman as the food security, the community engagement piece, right? Is there a way, because I'm thinking about how that can be paired with other services, when I think about dedicated funds just for community engagement around food security, when there's so many other things that we could also be, like we need community engagement around every topic that comes through this city, right? So is there a way, in trying to be fiscally responsible, is there a way to maybe package that the community engagement piece differently, where there could be the food security, but I don't know, in partnering with other departments as well? And so, I mean, because typically if you're having an issue in one area, it's affecting a lot of other things and sort of all encompassing. And I know we've got Office of Neighborhood Services, but they can't be going door to door every day and knocking doors. And we've got other things, but it just seems like we could consolidate there. And I just don't know if your thoughts on what would be other possible consolidations and how you find the community engagement doing yourself from, as opposed to maybe some other departments that do community engagement, and what's working, what's not.
Yeah, so I think I think you may be referring to the community outreach leaders.
Yes, sorry, I say
program.
community engagement, but it is the community outreach. Yep.
And that is a community engagement sort of approach. We actually, the 5 organizations that we worked with for that, we specifically were looking for organizations that do a variety of community outreach as well as other types of work around safety net support and community engagement on many issues. They weren't necessarily food organizations in their communities, because there's evidence around peer-to-peer education across, right? So if you're talking to somebody about housing, then you already are in that entry point, or you're talking about a workforce opportunity or utility needs, then it's like to make sure those folks that are already having those conversations in the community are equipped with the information about, like, if somebody asks them about SNAP or HIP, then they sort of have that information at their fingertips. And to your point, I think those are some of the conversations we've been thinking about with the participatory budgeting funds that Councillor Murphy mentioned a little bit ago. If we're going to be primarily supporting direct food access, is there a way that some of that community outreach can be paired with that? There are different pathways to achieve that, but I really appreciate that question. It's aligned with sort of how the different kinds of approaches we're thinking about moving forward.
No, it's great to know that that's sort of already happening, right? That's one of the beauty of these things, where you get to ask questions, like, the council, we're already doing it. And you're like, oh, beautiful, look at me. I can go back and say I got something done, right? But thank you for all the work you do on that. Could somebody explain to me what a circular economy is? I'm sorry, I do not know. I will be full admission there.
Sure, Councillor. Thank you for calling us on our jargon, but that is what it's called, but we probably need to think of ways to have it be better understood. So if I can paint sort of a general picture, it's the idea of really thinking about how we reuse materials from the very beginning to the end of their life cycle and build a whole sort of economic and, if I could say, social structure that supports that. So it has much more to do with reuse and economically viable ways of creating and reusing materials that goes way beyond what we've been sort of become much more familiar with, which is recycling, which actually isn't that sustainable long term. It's still extraction, use, and almost always sort of a lower quality use. So think of instead of focusing just on recycling, it's more about what do you do with the materials that come from a building that could actually be reused in a different building, or thinking about how you're not just looking for a recyclable cup at Fenway, but you're looking at Fenway has all reusable dishes, for example. I'm giving you sort of our dreams, but we have to start somewhere, and this is something that's much more common in Europe, for example, and we're hoping to be one of the first cities in the United States to really start making that shift.
Great. So the reduce, reuse, recycle, right, is the folks who still wanted the linear approach of extract, manufacture, throw out, is extract, manufacture, recycle. The reality is, 1/3, as Oliver mentioned, like 1/3 of our landfill capacity in the U.S. is construction and demo debris. That's stuff that's coming out of buildings that's not being repurposed. We just gave a climate leadership award to Boston Building Resources, a phenomenal group that reuses furniture and equipment and building materials so that folks can have access to things that have plenty of useful life. Before we think about throwing them out or even recycling them for their raw materials. So I think it's an evolution of that idea of saying for 30 years we're focusing on recycling. That sort of works for some materials, but the reality is there's a lot of useful life left in the stuff, and we're in a circular.
Does that, and last question, Vice Chair, on that, does that come down to like the homeowner when it comes down to that reduce, reuse, and that circular economy where things are pulled out? Because I mean, I just think about this and wanting to do projects on my own home and being like, well, that's a hefty price tag, so we're not doing that, for the next 5-10 years. But if you were able to somehow at a cheaper level reuse something from a building coming down and saying, well, the wood from that, that we just tore down, now you can build your back porch with that wood and it's cheaper than buying wholesale or something like that. I mean, does it get down to that granular level?
Yeah,
that's great.
If you redo your kitchen and you think there's useful life left in your cabinets, but you want a different set of cabinets, then you can donate the entire set of cabinets to be reused in somebody else's kitchen. Right. Or you can, hardscape, countertops. If you're replacing your water heater because you want to, I just replaced my water heater to go all electric, there was still useful life left in the water heater, somebody else gets to use it.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. I mean, I'm just thinking about our aging infrastructure, and I know my house is falling apart, and I'm like, how do we stay in Boston and stay in the house that you have, right?
Exactly.
Without breaking the bank. But thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate everything that you do, and we're here to help. So please reach out if you need anything as well. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Vice Chair. Thank you. Y'all are the least controversial, political, because this is the good stuff. You're not planning and development here. Those are the ones that get the rough questions in the police department. But y'all are doing God's work right now, so y'all are lucky. But I still got some rough questions, so don't get too comfortable, okay? Y'all ready? All right. I should just say I'm joking because most people get freaked out by me, so I was just teasing the whole entire time, y'all. Just relax. Okay, so I am curious, and I'm really excited because I see the intersection of food justice and climate justice, kind of like those two things go hand in hand, especially when we've seen things in like Central America, in Guatemala, and Chile. Having visited those countries, learning about kind of like the migration of how they've come to this country to live in America, a lot of it has been because of displacement, and it's been because of climate, and it's been because of access to food, right? So all of these things are interconnected. So I think it makes sense for us to have a collaborative conversation around these two intersections. So happy to be here. I have several questions. So let's just start with climate. These are folks that aren't really engaged in the climate conversation, particularly Black and brown people. I always talk about that. That's always my lens when I speak around climate issues because that's what I understand most. There have been a lot of small businesses down Columbia Road in particular that whenever it rains, there's flooding, those businesses get impacted, and I've been advocating and working with the administration. This was when previous Chief White Hammond was in office, to really think about what opportunities exist to engage low-income, Black and brown, even if it's through small businesses, in the conversation around climate justice, because they seem to now understand how climate is impacting their business. And so how are you looking at, from a creative standpoint, engaging low-income communities around the climate justice conversation? And I'm pointing to the small businesses because that is a place, a point of entry for small businesses, the bodega owners, the barber shops, the hair salons, the nail salons that are down in, up and down our strips. Those folks are hotbeds, I believe, for good community engagement, but it's only when there's a crisis that they see themselves impacted by climate justice. So how are you taking advantage of those moments to help engage them in the broader conversation?
Yeah, I have two initial responses. I'd invite Oliver and Chris certainly to weigh in. One is, I think we don't begin the conversation about climate, right? I think there's a certain audience that we start with that conversation because that's what resonates. But what we really talk about is energy affordability and about the risks to the business, in the case of small businesses, and the buildings that they're located in from natural hazard events, right? And the actions that we're asking people to take are oftentimes good for the climate from both a mitigation and resilience perspective to begin with. So when we talk about BCCE, the Boston Community Choice Energy Program, it's about buying cheaper power. It also happens to be greener power. And so you're contributing to the climate, but it's about the energy affordability of the business to say, can I take advantage of the collective buying power of all the small businesses in Boston and sign up for those types of programs?
I'm going to peel it a little bit further, because that still, for some of the small businesses, that's a little bit higher here. I'm going to go something more recent. Boston Water and Sewer. Whenever it rains, Columbia Road gets flooded. Those businesses get impacted. They lose their, their products and services because of flooding. How, or what, if any, opportunities exist to educate, engage, or mitigate that for those businesses?
Yeah, so on natural hazard preparedness, we are identifying neighborhoods that are disproportionately impacted by localized flooding, and then reaching out either through their community associations, the business associations, and, enabling our folks to go door to door to say, what are the solutions that we can bring, that make sense to reduce that flooding impact. But the point I was making is, like, we don't start that conversation about saying, do you want to take action on climate? It's about how do we reduce that risk.
Right, and that's what we've been trying to help people understand how all of these things are interconnected, so that they can understand why climate is it is impacting them. But I would recommend, especially with some of these businesses, they're not tied into civic associations, or they're not part of the business associations. These are small, immigrant, non-English speaking folks who are just trying to keep their doors open, but they don't have a pathway towards the city. And I think that could be a really good point of entry, because now we're dealing with a crisis.
Councilor Mejia, if I may, I will punt to Chris to answer specific questions about like flooding risk on Columbia Road, but if you'll indulge me, I really appreciate the framing of your question. It just so happens that my family is from Guatemala, and I mean, even a family like mine that is fairly well off in that country, my mom was telling me a few months ago, the rains are really hard, and so milk doesn't get delivered, and I happened to be there, and I couldn't find milk in any of the grocery stores. And I think that this is a context that especially our newer immigrant communities fundamentally understand. I hate to say that that's an advantage, because it comes from severe disadvantage, but it is something that we must recognize as leaders who are working on climate change, but also, frankly, take advantage of to really build programs that fit what is a sort of instinctive understanding that environmental issues are what provides economic and social success and stability. And so I will put a finer point on something Brian and I have both mentioned a lot, the Boston Energy Saver program that we'll be launching. And that specifically is because we know that all these resources are out there, but businesses, for example, like the ones that you mentioned, haven't found a way to connect the dots to their economic interest. And that's not happening at the design level that happens. And so we are coming into the city to fill that gap. So I just really want to reflect back to you how your framing is so important to the work that we're doing.
Wow. For those folks who are tuning in, especially the climate people, see, I know how to talk here. No, I joke a lot, and that's okay. But I think that when it comes to climate issues, I always feel like people who are most impacted have the least understanding of that impact. And I think that I try to be the official translator and help people understand it from a different perspective, so that they can understand that climate justice is social justice, is racial justice, is economic justice. And so I think the more that we could do that here in this body, and also in the work that we're doing in community, I think the easier it's going to be able to help people understand how it all interconnects. And I really appreciate you speaking on the fact that for us, it is instinctual. Like for people, I'm an immigrant to this country, right? And the things that, like, we eat organic food back home, and then when we come here, someone tried to give me organic syrup, and I was like, oh, I don't want that fake stuff. I want the Sterling brand, right? Like, and that's the fake stuff, right? And so, like, I think that there is an opportunity to really engage the immigrant community around this conversation that both looks at food and the intersection of all of these things, because we live it, we understand it, and composting we do. It just becomes a political thing here, and then it becomes a problem when it's something that we used to do all the time, So I just think that it's a lot easier than it is complicated. And I think that we just have to start learning how to talk about it in a way that people can understand it. So, and I know my time, I cannot believe my time is over.
You're the
I'm the last one standing, that's
going.
right.
Keep going.
I'm gonna keep asking questions. No, don't worry, we're not gonna be here forever. but you just mentioned the Boston Energy Savers, the service. I'm just curious, what would be the projected cost of savings for participating, like for small businesses? What would the savings be?
Yeah, so I think it's going to vary very much by individual business, but what I will say, for example, that we've estimated that if we're just looking at what we are going to be able to bring in from Mass Save funding, which is their incentives and resources that are already available, but everyone just has such a hard time accessing them. Between 2025 and 2027, that'll be around $150 million of direct incentives. This is for residents and small businesses in sort of smaller buildings, but that actually sort of increases to over $300 million in terms of benefits when we take into account all of the sort of additional energy savings and the other things that come. So these are resources that are basically available to us, and we have an enormous opportunity to be able to bring them in because we're the ones paying for it. We pay for it on our utility bills, and that's how we're going to be able to bring it in.
So for those who don't know what the Boston Energy Savers program is that like you're putting, what is it?
It is, it's a lot of different initiatives that we'll be sort of rolling out over the summer into the fall to help folks who live and work in small buildings reduce their energy costs in the ways that work for them in their building. So for someone, for example, who owns a multifamily house, it might mean some help picking a contractor or evaluating bids to put some solar on your roof and do some insulation. For a business, it might be something different. For a renter, it might be learning how to talk to your landlord about this sort of thing. It's really a big range of things.
Yeah, so I would say that when it comes to this particular conversation, there's some folks who are afraid about this. They think that they're gonna get swindled. They think that there's like, I don't know why, but people are afraid of this.
Absolutely.
Situation here. So I'm trying to think about how can we, going back again to the framing, like how can we use this as a teachable moment? How can we really help people understand what's going to be the return on that investment, both for the climate and also for your pockets, right? Like that's the bottom line, right? That's how we would position it.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, what's the total of the cost for rolling out the 30 green roofs on the bus shelters? And can we justify that investment in terms of cooling effect?
Sure. So we actually will have a report at the end of this month that looks back at the process for implementation, and it's the first year of what will be a 3-year evaluation of that project overall. And so happy to share that report with you and track the impact over the next 3 years.
Chris, you know, I'm having a moment that I hope it was probably you that I asked the question in my early years and here in the city council about, where you probably were the chief of streets then, I don't know where you were, but I asked about asphalt. And it went viral. Do you guys remember that? Everybody, it was a traumatizing moment. I asked about asphalt because there's heating islands, there's the things that we cool. And I think I asked the question around the correlation between the heat and the violence. And everybody thought I was stupid because I felt like I was onto something because there was some studies, actually. There were some folks that actually validated my question to you. And my curiosity still consists of trying to figure out whether it's the way we color the streets. Can we talk about what we're doing to help cool things down?
So let me talk for a moment on the bus shelters, and then we'll get to that, because I think you're touching on, there are 3 benefits to measure, or at least 3 benefits from those bus shelters. So the costs are the easy part, to figure out how much so there's stormwater retention. So these are actually done in trays on top of the roof, so that's water that is no longer flooding out small businesses on roads, it's no longer, it's not entering in the system. There's urban heat island, so it's a cooler bus shelter, to stand in and wait for the bus to come, and that's critically important in terms of bus utilization, because it's not just about how frequent and comfortable the bus is, but what's the entire process from where you're coming from to where you want to go, and how do we make that as comfortable as possible. And then the third one, which is probably the hardest to measure, is it's a pollinator highway. So we intentionally chose plants in those green roofs to actually allow bees to get between parks because we know that the health of our natural ecosystem requires pollinators, and pollinators are under assault from climate change and other human-induced toxins all the time. So those 3 wins are like, that's why we're really excited to pilot this along a route, because it's not just a bus route, it's a pollinator route. So we're trying to figure out how do we adequately measure those benefits, but we're excited about the triple win there. Your question on urban heat island is very germane to the entire conversation, because we oftentimes talk about tree canopy coverage as sort of this catch-all. It is a critically important solution to this, and there are many benefits to trees, including shade and canopy coverage, but that's not the only approach to reducing urban heat island. So the color and the type of materials we're using in our hardscape is really important. Los Angeles and Southern California have piloted painting asphalt a different color, because you can reduce that and anybody who knows, right, if you're playing basketball on a court that's black asphalt, or if it's like painted a light color in the middle of the summertime, it's 90 degrees out, totally different experience in terms of the heat coming off that. So how do we look at the types of materials we're specifying, not only in our public realm, but in our private realm? I would love to see all of Boston, the next time people are redoing the roofs, for it not to be a black EPDM roof as a default, but a white one. And we know from studies over the last 20 years, you can have a 20-degree temperature differential in the middle of the summer, just based on the color of your roof.
Can we write an ordinance on that? Can we just make that happen into law? Go ahead, Councilor Pepin.
We can make that happen.
Okay, we'll make it happen.
So there are a lot of options to address that question, but you're absolutely right. Like,
See, I am right.
I mean, even a kid knows, right, that the color of the material on a hot summer day determines how hot that material is.
Thank you. You just gave me a restorative justice moment. I proved all of those naysayers wrong right now just with that answer. I appreciate it. See, I knew I was onto something.
And if I can add something, actually, you're absolutely right, because when I had my private ways hearing, I had presentations from I think it was the University of Iowa, and they were presenting on like soybeans or some sort of asphalt that has soybeans in it. So it's a more natural material. It's more expensive, obviously, but it actually leads to less heat production on the street. So you were onto something. Whoever laughed at you, shame on them.
I know. I just didn't know how to combat them then. And then in Guatemala, I'm going to keep going back to your country. They were also building with bamboo instead of other products. They were like really looking. So I went on expedition trips to learn a little bit about. I had to leave this country to learn about climate, but that was the best way for me to figure things out. But they took me on a tour, and they were really demonstrating kind of their innovative ways of how they were trying to address the climate crisis that Guatemala was facing. So anyways, I did go over my time, and I do appreciate the Vice Chair allowing me, but I do have one last question, but it is for food justice. So y'all are off the hook for now. I'll come back at you. Second round of questions, no. But for the food justice folks, and I think given everything that's happening on the federal level, food insecurity is going to be one of the things that we're going to see in terms of one of the greatest needs. I think that it's going to be the next pandemic that we're going to see in terms of like response. Mental health was during COVID. I feel like food insecurity and access to food, we're going to feel the crunch given the economic times that we're going to be dealing with. So during COVID, and I think we've talked about the Bodega project that we developed in partnership, that we partnered up with nonprofit organizations. As you continue to think about culturally competent and food that is easily accessible to people, particularly folks who are undocumented, who are now afraid to even go to the supermarket, what are we doing, or what can we be doing to strengthen our relationships with the local convenience stores, and maybe partner up with some of our farmers markets to build some relationships so that it's a win for everybody and people can have access to many farmers markets with bodegas? I don't know.
So yeah, those are some of the conversations we've been having in recognition of the conditions we're hearing about, right? Some of the stores that we're currently working with, we're hearing about reduced foot traffic. Not a surprise, this is like documented across Boston, particular neighborhoods, as well as other cities where people are afraid to go to the grocery store or to food pantries. So we are thinking about, are there ways we could build in aspects with our current initiatives or participatory budgeting resources that could include sort of more innovative projects where there's like delivery, or it's tricky to sort of resource that in a way that is sustainable and most impactful because it's very resource intensive. So I don't want to, I'm not sure exactly where we're going to land, but we're looking at, are there ways with the community groups that are already doing this work in particular neighborhoods to resource sort of innovative strategies that they are developing, where they are sort of have the best pulse of what the needs are in the community around those type of fears. And I'm kind of studying a lot of what the different initiatives that both our office and other community-led initiatives during the pandemic, because I think there are a lot of things that were tried that we could be scaling up or using in very targeted ways to address when we see pockets of like shifting patterns of what people's needs are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I see we hosted a roundtable discussion, a private one, with in February regarding, folks who are living in fear now because of the Trump administration, and many are undocumented. And so what we've learned in our work with some of these organizations is that they are developing the infrastructure. They're looking at the mutual aid, and folks are doing food deliveries. They're taking people to go to the supermarket so they don't have to get on public transportation. So there are ways for the city to continue to strengthen through some of those grants. That could be a way. One of the things that I've been fighting for, and I know we sent the letter to the mayor in regards to some of the things the initiatives that we are fighting for, is an increase for an emergency fund that will help support folks who are housing insecure, food insecure, so that you have some funding to be able to tap into to be able to meet the moment. I think that is definitely something that I am deeply passionate about. I know what it's like to stand in the pantry line, but back then it was the big block of yellow cheese and that big bucket of butter. It was nasty, but it was free, and we were happy that we were able to get it. And to stand in line, that's the hardest thing to do, is to stand in line and get food when everybody knows that you're poor. So I think that I would love to see some programming where you could do that with dignity. And I think that is the missing piece of all of this work as it relates to the food insecurity situation. And I don't have an answer for that. We created a little program with the Bodega Project where you can go shop and nobody knew that you had a gift card. Like you just gave your name at the checkout and they can buy whatever they want. What happens with food insecurity is that you get what you get and you don't get upset. You get a box and they put whatever they want in that box, and then if you don't eat potatoes, you're gonna have to figure out, you're gonna sell them to the person that does, right? Like, I just feel like those are the things that I feel like there's an opportunity for us to really think creatively of how we can help address that issue. And then the last thing that I'll say in regards to food insecurity is that we worked with, it's Codman Square. There are a few that have winter farmers markets, but they didn't have coupons for winter discounts. They have them in the summer and not the winter. And we leveraged our personal network, and we were able to provide them a small mini grant so that they can provide. I think that you do have some of that winter funding, or no?
So the coupon program has not been, we have not been doing this specific citywide coupon program in the winter. I know there's definitely opportunities with the way it was structured to really, with the goal of having folks have as much choice citywide as possible, and just sort of operationally, it didn't make sense the last couple of years to have, because there are so few winter markets. And right now we're doing this planning process with the farmers markets, and Codman Square is one of the markets on the planning committee. We are looking at sort of, now that we aren't running the specific ARPA-funded coupon program after this year, what are sustainable approaches that could include year-round support? not being tied to this one specific operational design, but like how do we meet the needs? And so I'm hoping that will include things that might be not your traditional farmers markets, maybe CSAs, maybe winter markets, sort of depending on resources and yeah.
And yeah, I would say that the Codman Square would probably be a good case study since they piloted their winter's coupons because they were able to get a small fund to do that. And I think it was really successful in terms of the need. So it would be a good follow-up with Cynthia Loge. She could probably help. She was the one that administered it. And then there was a question about the 2030 Climate Action Plan. I believe it's winding down, right?
No, it's actually, Councilor, it's, we're right in the thick of it, and May is one of the biggest months for sort of coming up with ideas with the community, and there's lots of meetings, and then there'll be a public comment period in July, and then we'll do more meetings after that.
Oh, okay. So that's good to know. I thought since we're almost getting to 2030, we'd be in a different place. So I thought we would be winding down, but we're just getting started.
Well, we do a climate action plan every 5 years approximately. The last one was in 2019, so it's overdue. So we've been really looking to do this quickly so that we have a really good starting point for the next 5 years, and thinking about it more in terms of sort of all the building blocks to 2050, but really focusing on what we're going to be doing over the next 5 years.
So the 2030 will become the 2050?
No, think of 2050 as sort of like the long-term goal.
We'll be all dead by then, but yeah.
Well, you're right. I hope at least to be retired by then.
I'm joking.
But actually, if I can turn this joke into something real, we used to do these plans only focusing on 2050, kind of knowing that we weren't going to be around for them, and now we're doing them. We're doing this one for 2030 when we're all still going to be here and we're going to be accountable for it. So it's a new kind of plan.
Okay, great. I'm happy to hear that because I remember in 2019 when I ran for office, there was a forum and they asked everybody, did you read the 2030 report on the climate? And all of the candidates, they were like, yeah. Boo. I'm like, y'all are lying. I said, I did not read it. I'm sorry. It was a big document. But yeah, I think that y'all should make it more creative. I just feel like there's a lot of information there in that plan that, again, I'm going to keep going back to, you have to make things digestible for people who aren't in these spaces having these conversations because there was then a disconnect. So I think that in order for people to really get excited about the plan, then maybe we should include some of the folks in designing the plan.
Absolutely.
Do you invite?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a great deal of engagement where we're really doing things differently from the past and really giving opportunities for people on a huge range of ways to get involved. If it's someone who just wants to be at home and fill out a survey on their phone, that's possible, all the way to meetings in a bunch of different neighborhoods, coming to events. Also, folks who want to actually maybe spend a little more time at a meeting on a particular topic that it's being hosted by a community or topic organization, not us, so that it's sort of more approachable. A big range of different options.
Yeah, we should do one at a hair salon. You get your hair
love
blown
that.
out.
Great.
Talk about, they got 45 minutes sitting in that chair. You know how long it takes to get your hair done? Okay, so I'd like to be on your committee, on your outreach and engagement committee to help you with getting more people involved in the climate action.
Right.
Because if I'm going to be a part of it, which I'm going to be a part of this next iteration of it because now I'm in this seat. Before I was trying to get into the seat and I didn't understand. Now that I'm in this seat, I want to make sure that I'm helping to develop or at least help collect information for the next plan. So that when my daughter's in this seat, she could be like, my mom helped me with this 50 plan. Okay, I'm done for the day. Thank you very much for the indulgence. I really do appreciate you all taking the time to answer my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. All right, I'm going to give myself some time as well.
You're not. You're still 14 minutes.
All right. So first of all, just thank you so much for being here for this hearing. And I do want to thank you all already for collaborating with my office for doing a flood mitigation meeting in Roslindale. Believe it or not, we do have flooding issues in Roslindale, despite we don't have a body of water near us. So I'm looking forward to that meeting. I also just wanted to say thank you to a District 5 resident, Aliza, for all the work that you do, and to another District 5 resident that I see over there. Thank you so much for everything that you do as well. District 5 is well represented. Okay, I'm gonna dive right into questions. Aliza, I'm gonna start with you. As you know, the daily table closed in my district, right in Mattapan Square. That was probably one of the best resources for food, for healthy, affordable food in that part of Mattapan, or in Mattapan in general. I would love to know, one, is your office being approached in terms of what is going to replace that establishment? How can residents continue to get healthier food? I personally believe that you should be part of the conversation as to what goes there, because I do want to see another grocery store. But what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I appreciate the sort of concerns and not knowing how folks in that neighborhood are going to compensate. I do know some folks probably are going to the Dorchester Daily Table. They have seen an increase in foot traffic since the Mattapan, they had to close the Mattapan store. And so, you know, hopeful that many people are still being able to afford food, but obviously that's, you know, not right in their community. We have not been part of any direct conversations about who will be leasing that space. I know it's still vacant, but we'd be interested in, you know, if there are ways we can help connect dots around that. And there was the first part of your question. I think there was another piece to your question. I would just say we're conscious of thinking about, you know, making sure with our other programming that we're really attending to the needs of that community in Mattapan and Hyde Park. We have sort of expanded our engagement with, particularly for the Farmers Market coupon program. Until last year, we didn't have any organizations that were distributing coupons in Hyde Park, and now we do. And that's expanded. So and with the assessment that we did, we were really trying to, due to the high food insecurity rates in Mattapan, sort of oversample and ensure that we are understanding the particular needs of residents facing food insecurity there, but definitely open to any ideas about how to sort of address that gap, because it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and we are lucky in that part of my district that there is a lot of food pop-ups and a lot of food pantries that are organized by community members. We actually heard one of the testimonies from Rick Henry, who leads an amazing one called the Hyde Park Food Pop-Up. But what they were kind of explaining to me when the last time I was there is that they don't have a place to store their food if it's not taken that day of. So it kind of goes to waste, or they just, I don't know, just think about who they're going to give it to that day of. So is there anywhere in the southern part of the city where we can have like a community, well, I say community refrigerator, not like the ones we see out in the blocks, but I mean like a big storage room? Have we thought about that?
Yeah. So I know that the different nonprofits that are setting up the Greater Boston Collaborative Food Access Hub, part of the grant opportunity there and the broader scale of the project is to have somewhere, at least one place in the city that does include what we've been calling as a retail pilot, or sort of a food distribution site that includes actually sort of this focus on dignity that Councilor Mejia was mentioning, where people have choice. It is the experience of going to a grocery store. There's adequate cold storage. It's up to those nonprofits where they decide what is feasible, like, because there's so many different organizations involved. I know that beyond the YMCA of Greater Boston, ABCD, the Neighborhood Food Action Collaborative, which includes the Hyde Park Food Pop-Up, a number of other organizations are sort of in conversation about how do they set something like that up now that can benefit from the cold storage, both in the 30 Northampton site as well as on site wherever that is. And I know that I think folks are thinking about kind of that community and what the gaps are. I think it's just, may depend on sort of what actual buildings are available or resources. They've been looking at sort of other philanthropic opportunities that could provide that kind of investment that leverages the ARPA investment from the city.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was trying to look up. There's an organization in the Reedville part of Hyde Park, like very end of Reedville, almost Milton, that almost dead. I'm sorry. That is a food distribution company, and they have a huge warehouse down there. So maybe that's somewhere looking in terms of collaborating with them for space. But their name is escaping me at the moment, so I'm gonna try to get that for you.
Yeah.
And in terms of the former space of the Daily Table, I think that I know I've been in conversation with Chief Shagun to create a partnership with you, so to help identify what would be a right institution or business to replace the Daily Table there. So maybe we can make that interdepartmental connection.
Yes, thanks, Councilor. We'd be very open to that.
Of course. All right, I have a question regarding BESS systems. I'm not sure who's that for, but there is a proposed location by Eversource behind the Stop and Shop on American Legion Highway in my district, and I understand the reasoning behind it. I think obviously we need it. I believe that the energy level in Hyde Park and Rosslyn has reached its limit in terms of actual giving proper energy. How do you see this impacting the city or energy costs in terms of, I know there's a lot of question of like, is this safe? Is this reliable? You don't have to go into the weeds because we already had a hearing on this, but I just want to know, like, what do you foresee this impacting the city?
Yeah, I think battery energy storage systems at scale are part of the solution to a reliable, affordable green grid. And we know that one of the challenges that we have with renewables like offshore wind or solar is, are we generating the green power we need at the time that we actually want to use it, or do we need to store it? Right. And so one of the technologies over the last decade that's really increased significantly, on the order of sort of the microchip and, computer capacity, is storage. And so when we think at scale, some of the plants that are being described now are the size of sort of from a storage capacity, or the size of a medium-sized power plant. So what that allows you to do is identify locations within the grid and within Boston where they make sense, where they can address some of these choke points. So I know that that's an area, in Hyde Park where there's been power reliability issues. And if the question is, do you want a substation with all of the wires that those require in that infrastructure, or can storage actually help mitigate that nearer term and provide the benefits of being able to store renewable power when it's generated, perhaps in the middle of the night, from offshore wind, and then you can use it when you need it. It's going to be part of our future. And the question is, as Oliver had been mentioning, is where do we put them in the most strategic ways that meet our energy grid, so we're not replacing every wire that's out there, but also are cognizant of, are they economic development opportunities, or in the locations that make sense? Have we addressed all the safety concerns? So I think we're going to see more of those. It is new, which is why we're looking across the country at best practices, at standards, how do we cite them? But it is part of the solution, as opposed to saying, we just need a whole lot more power plants and need overcapacity.
Absolutely. No, I've been lucky enough to meet with Eversource a few times on this and go to the Mountain Hope Canterbury Neighborhood Association meeting where they've done a great job of presenting. So I think that the community finally has an idea of what this is and why we need it. So hopefully that goes well. The last question that I want to bring up is the Neponsit River is the only body of water that runs through my district. I think it's only the second river in the city that crosses, other than obviously the Charles River. We are currently seeing a lot of projects through DCR that are improving the access to it, but I want to know, what role does the city play in terms of access and the health of the Neponsit River? Because there's a huge organization in Hyde Park and Mattapan that are meeting on a bi-weekly or monthly basis to make sure that the projects are going through. There's a park right now being built on River Street that is going to give access to the river. So what role does your cabinet play in all this?
Yeah, I'm happy to begin, and then Chris, you can feed in the details. Actually, one of my first public events in returning to City Hall was with EPA Region 1 and David Cash. There are a number of brownfield sites along the Neponsit River that are being cleaned up, and part of that is through land that the city controls, either is defined park space or otherwise that is owned that we're providing access to. So I think the first thing is like, let's make sure the river and the access is clean and we're reinforcing. And then it's how do we bring to it, the types of uses, be they passive or active recreation, access to that water, in the right fashion. But I think we are, one of the challenges that Chris and the city and I deal with is that we don't own a lot of our shoreline. Right, only 16% of, including riverine shoreline, is actually owned by the city of Boston. 50% is owned by the state. A lot of that is DCR. Yeah. And so we're constantly partnering with our state partners and then federal resources to get, water bodies cleaned up. At that event, which I think you may have been at, was like one of the cooler, there were birds flying down at the time that were opening up, and that was phase one of a multi-phase cleanup. But it's like we are making progress. These projects take a long time. But, it's just great to see that potential. And rivers have an amazing amount of ecological restoration capacity in themselves once you remove the ongoing pollution, where like nature starts doing its thing again and creates a positive spiral.
The one quick thing I would add, Councillor, with credit to the Neponset River Watershed Association, they are convening the 14 communities essentially that are part of that watershed and are putting forward an implementation plan both about the ecology and health of the river itself, as well as projects, whether around stormwater resilience or coastal resilience, that we should be thinking about in the Neponset River and the Neponset River estuary. Happy to sit down with you and sort of go through that plan. Happy to bring in Neponset River Watershed Association, who are really leading this effort. That's of interest.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's something that my office is starting to get more involved in. We were able to team up with the Edgewater Neighborhood Association for that project. So it's something that everyone's excited for in the district.
And Councillor, if I may, I know you know this, but for all the people watching here, of course, one of the core functions that we have is the Conservation Commission. And I know Director Alice Brown quite well. We'd be happy to talk about specifically in Neponset, but just in general, this is we are happy to say that DCR does go through the Conservation Commission process, which is wonderful, and sort of give themselves go through the process that allows the Conservation Commission to look at all the different things that affect quality of life and environmental quality, and also just to bring it full circle to a comment from Councillor Coletta Zapata quite a while ago. This is another instance of why the wetlands ordinance and being able to incorporate climate resilience and environmental justice is so important, because that is something that the Conservation Commission promulgates.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say, it's not really a question, more of just like an observation. We are very excited for the Mattahunt Woods to open up. That's something that the residents have been waiting for, so I'm looking forward to that ribbon cutting whenever that happens. So thank you so much for prioritizing that project. It seriously is one that is going to add value to that area. And please let me know before that happens so that I can invite the neighbors. So that the neighbors get to be part of the celebration. And on a more serious note, Mattapan continues to have the highest rate of childhood asthma. And as someone that has asthma, I just want to make sure that you all always have that in the back of your minds when you're doing projects and investing into communities, to really consider Mattapan always for that. And my office is actually, we're teaming up with the Children's Hospital to host a asthma symposium in May. So actually, it is May, wow. At the end of this month, to make sure that we are bringing awareness to this, and if there's any way our office could team up with your cabinet, just bring more awareness and what else we can do as a city, I would really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, as I'm sure you're keenly aware, there are outdoor triggers and there are indoor triggers to asthma. And I think one of the things you've seen us focus on, in particular with our push on electric induction cooking and understanding kitchens, is that removing sources of and actually to Councilor Mejia's earlier point, like removing sources of natural gas burning in your house continuously is a public health issue, right? And it reduces the triggers of asthma, and it's good for the environment, but that's not the thing that most people care about. It's asthma rates of their kids and senior citizens and our family members.
Exactly. But that's it for me. Councilor Mejia, do you have follow-ups?
Just two.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Y'all are never going to come back to these hearings when I'm here, right? No, you have here until 5, just so you know. But you just, there's two things. I'm curious, and if I'm curious, I'm sure other people are curious. You're talking about the stormwater where you put the little plants, and that's how the gutters, and can people do that in their homes too, or is just, you have, can you do that in your,
In terms of green roofs?
yeah?
Yeah. So green roof systems can come in trays, and so it's the tray that sort of controls the water, and then the plants drink the water, and then it also evapotranspirates when it's sunny out. So yeah, green roof trays are a great addition to most roofs, but check with your structural engineer because I know we're on the record.
So there should be a program for the city to pay to help people learn about that and to do it, right? Or there is
Correct.
already or anything?
So through the Boston Water and Sewer Commission and their stormwater program, there are grants and credits that they're offering for folks to make alterations to their property. Happy to follow up with some information.
You're
on that.
welcome, everybody that's tuning in. So I'm giving you stuff that you can take advantage of. And then this is a question that may be a little bit interesting, but most recent, and this is not within your scope, but it is something that I'm intrigued by. So White Stadium, the Emerald City people were upset because we're killing trees and we're taking land that's green and making a whole stadium, and everyone's talking about the public transportation and all those things. I'm just curious, and this is a real innocent question because I'm really trying to grapple with this dynamic here. At one point, we're talking about climate justice and reducing transportation and all this. We're doing a stadium in a place that is predominantly green right now. We're going to be creating a whole entertainment industry, if you will, at some point. There'll be more buses. There'll be more. All of these things that we say impact the climate and environment are now going to be in that concentrated area that already feels like a concrete jungle, right? From the other parts of it. So I'm just curious, how is the city from a climate justice, how are we grappling with this dynamic?
I'm happy to take that one. So as you know, this is a rebuild of a stadium that's been there since the 1940s. So a lot of the trees, and this is all up on the website, we had a tree hearing in December, a lot of the trees that are being removed are actually invasives or older and poor health, or have literally grown through the fences and the concrete over decades of that deterioration of what has always been a BPS sports facility. And when we think about climate justice and environmental justice, we also have to think about who are the users of the facilities that we have produced. One of the stats that I have found most startling is that the sports participation rate of BPS students is half of the statewide average. So when you talk about opportunities for all of our students, but in particular, our Black and brown students to have access to state-of-the-art athletic facilities, which is part of the motivation, certainly when I was in high school, of continuing to go to school and get good grades and focus, we need to provide those facilities in places that make sense to do that.
That's not the question. The question really is the extra add-ons, which is the beer garden, the soccer, people coming from the suburbs to come and be, spectators of the hood. Those are the sort of things that I'm struggling with. What's that look like? Because I'm not talking about, we all agree that we need to restore White Stadium. And my concern from the climate justice conversation is the influx of vehicles that are going to be coming into the city, that are going to be occupying, and they're talking about buses, and buses have fumes. How is that, how are we coming to terms with that? That's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, so for that particular question, the timing of the question is excellent because the draft transportation plan is out for comment in terms of to allow access to this stadium on not only for Boston University soccer games, but also for BPS events. And there's been a prioritization for utilizing our public transit system, so focusing on last mile from the Orange Line, from the commuter rail stops, using shuttle buses that do prioritize EV wherever possible. As I know you're aware, we're transitioning as quickly as we can all of our bus infrastructure to be EV and low emissions, so that we are not adding parking, at Franklin Park for the reason that you're talking about, not just the congestion, but saying we don't want to invite additional vehicle traffic, to the park itself. We want to actually consolidate and have, as much of that done through a managed transportation plan as possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna let that one go just because that's just, it's one of those things that I'm just gonna have to keep on marinating and trying to have a better understanding. So then when people ask me questions, I know what to say.
Great.
I just still don't feel like I got it, but I appreciate you helping me at least get it a little bit closer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I don't have any follow-up questions, but I believe we have an in-person testimony here from Mr. Pearson. Mr. Pearson, would you like to testify? Oh, okay, that's totally fine. Well, it's good to have you here, sir. With that, I would like to move to closing remarks to the panelists. Would you like to provide any closing statements?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions. If we did leave anything out, feel free to reach out. We're happy to respond.
Absolutely. Councilman, any closing statements? Just making sure. Hey.
Thank you for your time.
Just making sure. No, seriously, thank you all so much for the work that you do. Thank you for being here. I look forward to continuing that collaboration with your separate departments and offices. So with that, this hearing on dockets number 0822 through 0830. Also number 0835 to 0836 is adjourned.